All right, joining us today on Pirate Radio Live, Shane Connuck of the Charlotte Observer, covering a little 49ers football and a lot of NASCAR. Shane, how you doing today?
Could be doing better with certain results of sporting events over the past couple of days, but beyond that, we've got our own fun stuff happening here with the Carolina Panthers. Next week, coming back home, or actually, sorry, this week playing at home against thinking about the Cowboys next week, and a lot's happening, and sports are happening. Happy to be here and break it all down.
Yeah, glad you can make some time for us today. This is just, going into October, the perfect time of year. You got the tail end of the NASCAR season, NFL kicking into gear, college football as well, and some MLB playoffs. Enjoying Cleveland and Detroit right now. Former Pirate Gavin Williams pitching. But we'll go ahead and get into the Charlotte 49ers. So Connor Harrell, starting quarterback, out for the remainder of the season. Is that correct?
Yes, that is. And they're liking the former Duke player Grayson Loftus at this point, but Connor Harrell, even so, I saw him back at Bank of America Stadium years before he was a Charlotte 49er, and that was when he was a backup quarterback who became the starter for the University of North Carolina Tar Heels. And a lot of fans up in Chapel Hill were happy with the way Connor Harrell played. It's particularly as a future starter up in Carolina, and he got some more action up there with the Tar Heels, but never this opportunity to really become the starter and take the reins in Charlotte was what seemed like the best bet for him. And before the injury, felt like the quarterback carousel that Charlotte had last year, where no matter who you've got, he'll make some starts, he'll look solid, and then throw a couple picks and you are ready to get another guy in there. It becomes kind of a three-man quarterback room where you can really be starting any of them and hoping to get to about a 500 record that way. And so no matter who Charlotte's got, it seems like it's mostly on to Grayson Loftus now, but Connor Harrell, a lot of promise there and a lot of deep experience here in this state.
Yeah, Charlotte starting off 1-3, only a 7-point victory over against Monmouth. Just what's the general feel about the team right now, 4 games in?
That Monmouth victory was exciting, but also the kind of thing that you look at it and you expect to win a game like that at the end of the day. You expect to win a lot of these early season games that teams schedule, and the fact that even this year, where there is arguably less excitement when you think about what Coach Poggi brought a year ago and just kind of that unknown with Charlotte. And I think now it kind of feels like if that team, with the way that Biff Poggi was assembling them and the coaching staff they had, couldn't really make traction nationally, that with Tim Albin and as great of a coach as he is and as hard as the Charlotte 49ers play for Coach Albin, it just feels like at the end of the day, they have their fans, they have their ceiling that Charlotte can make it to in the American Conference, because you notice the strength of a lot of these even if they play more and more competitive conference games, there are just certain opponents where they know they're looking to be a little bit above average in the conference, and it feels like just the ceiling is a little bit lower than you may think, and then at this point, unfortunately, you've kind of feels like with Coach Albin that the fans are excited, the low fan, but at the end of the day, I want to be a little bit better.
Yeah, in this conference, it didn't look as tough going into the season, but now you look at it, Navy's really good. North Texas is undefeated. You obviously have Memphis and Tulane who are always near the top. And here in Greenville, we're hoping the Pirates can be competitive with the top-tier teams in this conference. But coming up in a little more than a month, I think it's November 8th, Charlotte will make the trip to Greenville. And the last 2 seasons have not gone the Pirates' way, to say it nicely, I guess. They got stomped last year by a team we felt the Pirates should have beaten. But just to go ahead and look forward to that game, what does Charlotte do really well? How can they give the Pirates some trouble on November 8th?
It's just going to be they got to start fast. I mean, last year when East Carolina came to town, Charlotte ran up the score early and made that game not even close early on. And I think when you've got that kind of energy and that kind of fanfare that comes with a big in-state rivalry that becomes a conference showdown, you need to get on the foot early. And Charlotte being able to do that in those kinds of games makes a huge difference in just asserting that kind of dominance.
Yeah, and the schedule looks absolutely brutal going forward for Charlotte. South Florida, Army, Temple, North Texas, East Carolina, UTSA, Tulane, and you make a trip to Athens somewhere towards the end of the season. So what do you think Grayson Loftus, if he is the one going to be starting the rest of the season, what do you think he can do going forward with this team?
I think he could win some games. And like you said, though, about that Georgia game that they've had on the schedule, and that goes back to how Charlotte is needing to grow its program with these non-conference matchups. You play Georgia early in the year, and that's one of your 1-3 starts of the year. That's bad enough. But to have it be that you're waiting to play a non-conference game until you're getting a Georgia team later in the year, that's something that the Charlotte program has had its eyes on for years. And so it feels like you just want to do as much as you can with each individual moment. And when I say that, a year ago, when this Charlotte team played against Indiana, and I remember talking to Coach Poggi about that, and he's just like, why are we going into play a team that is going undefeated to start the season in the Big Ten? Why are we scheduling these matchups? And the reason is you're trying to grow the Charlotte program and you're trying to take positives you can take out of it. When you think back to that game in which the Niners went to Bloomington and played Kurt Cignetti's Indiana Hoosiers, Charlotte was in the game. Charlotte, the first half was competitive. Charlotte's running backs showed promise. And now we've gotten to a point where moving past last year's Charlotte running backs, Rod Gainey Jr. was very much behind them. But when you watched Cartavius Norton and all those guys in practice, Rod Gainey Jr., a freshman, got from Tampa, who was a stud in high school down in Florida, was getting reps along with Charlotte's other running backs. And Gainey showed a lot of just natural speed. And now this year he got injured as well, along with Connor Harrell last game. But we're starting to see Rod Gainey become a more dynamic back, and having him build up his speed and his abilities in Charlotte has been huge, and more about just that growing program, making strides, even in a big loss, getting to develop talent like that and develop special players here in Charlotte.
Shane Connuck joining us today on Pirate Radio Live. I want to go ahead and transition over to NASCAR. I got a lot of questions just because I'm a big NASCAR guy growing up in North Carolina. Kind of hard not to be. But this week got the Roval. You said before we started you're about to go and talk to Chase Elliott. So before we get into the Roval talk, how about that victory this past weekend in Kansas, going from 8th to 1st in the last 2 laps?
I did not see that one coming as those laps were winding down. And the story that also happened toward the end of that race was Zane Smith going for a ride. I mean, that was one of the bigger crashes that we've seen over the past couple of years. Just getting caught up in there like he did, just a natural moment, but way he flipped, and just great to have the safety that we have now, that Zane Smith climbing out of the car immediately. And then back to the action on the track. That race did not look like we were about to see a Chevrolet come out from back in 8th, like you just said, and get up toward the Toyotas that had been leading the race. Whether that ended up being Denny Hamlin, whether that ended up being Chase Briscoe coming back up from where he had started on the pole and ended up back in the top 5 later on, that was a really, really strong race to lead into the cutoff race at Charlotte.
And you mentioned Denny Hamlin and Bubba Wallace going at it there at the end. Interesting last 2 weeks with Denny. He tries to wreck his own team's car with 2311 with Bubba. And then last week he wrecks his owner's grandson with Ty Gibbs. What do you think that's just, how the race happened, or do you think this kind of shows some desperation, like Denny getting towards the end of his career and he wants this championship? I feel like this is the best car he's had and probably will have going forward. So I feel like it's this year for Denny. What do you think's been going on with Denny so far this year?
The past few years, it's felt like Denny Hamlin has had every shot. And then once you get into the playoffs, once you get toward the championship, Denny Hamlin just, whether it's some engine issue or it's getting caught up in, it's something different every year for him. And it feels like now you can tell how competitive it gets and how Team Penske continually figures it out later on, that as strong as each of Hendrick Motorsports cars are, as many races as William Byron or Kyle Larson can end up winning in a given year, or as strong as Joey Logano or Ryan Blaney will be at various points and put it together in the playoffs, it just has not only has it not happened for Denny Hamlin, but it has not happened for a Toyota or even a Chevrolet driver over the past few years. And so I think now as we start to see just how competitive these races get, you notice what drivers are doing to win races. It does feel like Denny Hamlin really wants that championship and is starting to race a little bit more aggressively and differently than he has in recent years.
Yeah, it's just fun. I don't like Ty Gibbs. I don't know why. It's just something about him. So seeing that was funny. But this past weekend, it was like you could have had it either way. Like Bubba winning, I think that screws a lot of people towards the back, like Joey Logano. I think Joey Logano even said thanks, Denny, for that. So just interesting stuff as we reach the end of the NASCAR season. But got the Roval in Charlotte this weekend. Lot of the fan base I don't think is a fan of the Roval track. What do you think about it?
I like it. I like changing it up. But here's the thing: when you have the Coca-Cola 600, and over the past couple of years, you don't even know if you're getting the entirety of the race in. What
Yeah.
makes it the longest race of the NASCAR season on what you know is one of the most iconic and straight up best tracks in terms of the race it produces, a mile and a half in the sport. So it's one thing to think about using it, bringing it back as the All-Star race. That is one good way to use Charlotte, but also the oval at Charlotte Motor Speedway is one of the best ovals that we have in the sport. And instead of using it twice when we go to certain tracks that we go to twice, we're trying to create a road course on it when we have all sorts of problems with different road course races. And at this point, we've seen AJ Allmendinger, a road course legend, figure out how to dominate on the Roval. But we've also seen dominance from Kyle Larson just as the great racer that he is. We've also tried to have it be that you get to this down to the wire, as it's been described to me, game 7, bottom of the ninth, 2 outs, that you have a turn. And then obviously when Jimmy Johnson and Martin Truex Jr. went at it back, I think it was the 2017 Charlotte Roval. And so it's had its share of history, and I'm excited to write. We'll see more in CharlotteObserver.com later this week from Chase Elliott and Kyle Larson, who are tied with 2 wins at the Roval apiece for the winningest drivers in the history of the Charlotte Roval, which now has its own lore itself in NASCAR's history books. And so the Charlotte Roval overall, we're getting to a point where it's just a fixture in these playoffs, produces some strong races, but ultimately I find myself agreeing with most of the fan base that the sport would be better with a pair of races on Charlotte's Oval.
Yeah, my problem with the Roval isn't even the track itself or the race itself. I don't think it should be a playoff race. I think the Charlotte Oval is perfect for a playoff race, but neither here nor there. It's besides the point, whatever. You mentioned Kyle Larson and Chase Elliott, just dominance and being really good on the Roval. Who do you think that's in this current 12 playoff race right now this is kind of bad for, this Roval being the last race of the round of 12?
I would say that it does not necessarily fare well for somebody like Denny Hamlin. I think that he's a guy who's going to excel on short tracks if it's the playoffs and it comes to it. And again, we've seen him end up that being the fate of his playoff runs. At the same time, it feels like those are the tracks where the Virginia native can really shine and get his big wins, and that having a road course like this, not only does it favor the road course drivers, but I think it favors a guy like Kyle Larson. It favors drivers who are good at figuring out how to win races. And I think those Toyota cars, yeah, some certain guys are okay on road courses and certain ones, but it feels like Charlotte is really more of, and again, this is good for the sport, but really more of just you really don't know who's going to win, and it's anybody's race. That being said, I think that can work out well for guy. I mean, obviously, yes, Kyle Larson won the thing last year, but it feels like that can bode well for certain drivers who are capable of winning on various tracks. But that Denny Hamlin and some of those Toyota drivers feels like those wins often come on certain types of tracks, and a lot of times not a road course, let alone having success at the Roval historically.
I do want to get your prediction for this weekend and the rest of the playoffs in general. But before we do, 2 things I want to hit on. I guess something going around the rumor mill. I'm a Kyle Busch fan, and RCR has been absolutely terrible for him, in my opinion. But I have seen rumors of maybe him going to 23-11. Is there any weight to that?
Possibly. You never know during silly season. You think you hear one thing, and, especially with Kurt Busch hanging around the race team. Kyle Busch, though, everything you hear is he's at Richard Childress Racing committed to a future there alongside Austin Dillon and driving the number 8 car and getting more involved with RCR's Xfinity Series, soon to be called the O'Reilly Auto Parts Series and Truck Series programs. And so, along with Colleague Racing and along with everything up there. And so it feels like Kyle Busch right now is very set at RCR, but you never know, and especially with the competitiveness of RCR in these races week in, week out.
Yeah, one more thing. Can you give us a quick update on the charter lawsuit? I feel like I haven't heard anything about that in the last couple weeks after the text message stuff. So what's the latest on the charter lawsuit?
Yeah, the text message stuff was the biggest development in that recently. Obviously, they are continuing to go back. And then a lot of questions up in the air about looking ahead at next year's season if teams end up having charter status, and a lot from both sides there. But yeah, the latest thing was learning about how NASCAR executives and had messaged about how they saw the sport along with compared to those teams. And so yeah, that was the biggest development there.
All right, Shane Connuck of the Charlotte Observer joining us. Before we let you go, who wins this weekend, and then who hoists the trophy on November 2nd coming out of Phoenix?
Back-to-back wins at the Charlotte Roval for Kyle Larson are coming up.
All right.
And the 2025 NASCAR Cup Series champion, it leaves Team Penske, it leaves the Fords, and Denny Hamlin figures out how to hoist the trophy as the 2025 NASCAR Cup Series champion.
I like it. I hope Denny gets it, but man, like you said earlier, it always seems like something goes wrong for him. Before we let you go, Shane, just let the people know one more time where they can find your stuff.
Follow me on X at Shane_Connuck and read everything from us at charlotteobserver.com.